When I was growing up, Capcom and fighting games were the chocolate and peanut butter of my childhood. I loved both of them individually, but if you put them together, it became an obsession of mine. I spent my developmental years renting Street Fighter and Darkstalkers from the video store every chance I got, or pumping quarter after quarter into Marvel at the arcade, or saving up my money to buy Rival Schools or Power Stone. Heck, the entire reason I'm an SNK fan today is because I saw Capcom vs. SNK 2 at the game store, and I said, I don't know who those guys are, but they're fighting Capcom, so I have to buy this. And as a fan of these titles, I cannot tell you how happy I am that this month Capcom Fighting Collection is coming out. This is something that people in the fighting game community have been asking for over a decade at this point. And finally, Capcom is listening to us. 10 games are all collected together in this package, including fan-favorite icons like Darkstalkers, which are now available for new players to check out for the very first time on this console generation, and Red Earth, a game that has been trapped in the arcades forever. Seriously, this is the first time this game has ever been released on anything outside the arcades. This has been my white whale of Capcom fighting games. I have spent years trying to track down a way to play this thing, and now I finally can. But there has been one bit of, let's call it, controversy in the lead up to this game's release. In an interview with the collection's producer, Shuhei Matsumoto, he was asked if the sales of this collection could possibly lead to new installments for any of these games. Ah yes, the old Capcom test, where Capcom releases an older game to see if people want a new game. A tactic that has never actually worked and has been heavily criticized for how little sense it makes, especially by me on this very channel. Well, Shuhei Matsumoto said that no, that wasn't going to happen, and some people were upset that once again the Darkstalkers would not have a chance to live again. But guys, this shouldn't have been a surprise to anyone. As I said, the Capcom test doesn't work. The Capcom test is dumb. It has always been dumb. So honestly, I'm kind of relieved to hear someone at Capcom say, no, this isn't a test for a new game. We're just releasing these old games because we think people should have the ability to play them. Which, yeah, we should. I love the idea of companies finally releasing some of their old titles so a new generation can experience them, and Capcom fighting games could absolutely benefit from that. And that's what makes me so excited for this collection. Because while Shuhei Matsumoto did say that we weren't going to get a new Darkstalkers or Puzzle Fighter out of this, and yes, saying those words out loud does hurt me, he did imply that Capcom is thinking about continuing these collections if this does well. And that's great news because the number of fun and interesting Capcom fighting games that are still locked inside the Capcom vault is staggering. There are so many more Capcom fighting games that need to be re-released that you could make an entire second volume of the Capcom Fighting Collection, or just collections dedicated to a specific series. So, because of that, today I'm going to count down 10 Capcom fighting games and fighting game franchises that need a re-release. But before we start, a few ground rules. First, I'm only going to include the games that Capcom owns the rights to, which means that we will not be including things like the Capcom vs. SNK games, the Marvel games, that JoJo game they made, that Fate Stay Night game they made, or the Street Fighter movie game. Don't get me wrong, those are all amazing games. Okay, all but one of them are amazing games, but even the bad one in that mix deserves to be re-released so that way people have a chance to play it. But to keep this slightly more realistic, I'm just going to focus on the games that Capcom could potentially use. And secondly, for that one person out there who is going to suggest it, only games that have actually been released. So no incomplete port of Capcom Fighting All-Stars. But alright, I've stalled for long enough. Let's quarter up and get ready to jump into Capcom's long history of lesser-known fighting games, starting with number 10, Ring of Destruction. Back in 1993, Capcom put out Saturday Night Slam Masters, their own wrestling game starring Mike Hagar and a wide cast of original characters, and it was interesting? Yeah, it was a 3-button fighter, but considering that one of the buttons was a pin button that you could only use if your opponent was already beat, and another button was the jump button, really it meant this was basically a 1-button fighter. But it was still impressive how much you could do in this game with just that one button. You could grab your opponents, you could pick up items, you could do special moves or jump off with the turnbuckles. It was a very unique game. But does it hold up today? Not really. However, the sequel to that game, Ring of Destruction, yeah, that one is actually pretty darn good. Ring of Destruction was now a 4-button fighter with far more impressive graphics that played out more like a traditional fighting game, with lots of really unique special moves that were very easy to combo into. So, why is it all the way down at number 10? Well, originally it was way higher on this list because I didn't think there was much of a chance of it ever returning. But then just this week, Capcom announced that they were going to bring the original Saturday Night Slam Masters to their Capcom Arcade Stadium, and if that game is getting a re-release, then odds are Ring of Destruction isn't far behind it. If we get a third season of the Capcom Arcade Stadium, then I think Ring of Destruction is a shoo-in. Also, it is worth pointing this out because I'm sure some people are going to bring it up in the comments section. There are rumors that there might be some legal problems behind why this game hasn't been re-released before, because all the brand new characters in this game were designed by Tetsuo Hara. You know, the guy who made Fist of the North Star? As if the game's poster didn't make that abundantly clear to you. Yes, Capcom reached out to a man who created one of the most legendary mangas of all time, asked him to create some big new iconic stables for them, and he came back with Jumbo Flapjack, Titanic Tim, and Biff Slamkovich. That's their actual names. I am not kidding. And because of his involvement with the game, there have been rumors going around for years that the reason why this game has never been re-released was because of him. But now that Saturday Night Slam Masters is being re-released, it is very clear that those rumors were all fake. Meaning now there is nothing stopping this hidden gem from Capcom's past from returning, so in case we ever do get a third season of the Capcom Arcade Stadium or a second volume of the Fighting Collection, then yeah, this game would be perfect to put on there. Speaking of games that are rumored to have legal problems behind them, Number 9, Onimusha Blade Warriors. So you know the Capcom demon-slaying samurai franchise Onimusha? Yeah, I'll bet many of you didn't know that it had its own fighting game. And now that I've told you that, I'm sure a dozen different ideas of what type of fighting game it could be are racing through your mind. A slow, methodical, strategic fighter like Samurai Showdown? Or maybe Capcom just went nuts with the power-ups and demons that you could fight in that game and made a quick and crazy Marvel-style game. How about a platform fighter? Yes, because when I think of Onimusha, the first thing that comes into my mind is Smash Bros. Yeah, this is an odd choice, but I'd still love to see this include a new fighting game collection or maybe an Onimusha collection. If we ever get more Onimusha re-releases, seriously, Capcom, what's up with that? I know the first re-release didn't sell enough to pass the Capcom test for a brand new game, but surely it must have sold enough to get an Onimusha 2 re-release. And this game would be great for a new collection because it could provide players with a ton of single-player content as it comes with multiple unlockable characters. Now, as for why it's so low on this list, well, it's because, again, I'm trying to be realistic here, and there might be some legal problems with this game as well, since Onimusha is well known for basing the appearance of their protagonists off of famous actors. But considering that we got that re-release of the original Onimusha I just mentioned, I'd say there's a chance Capcom has come to some kind of an understanding about that. So let's give all those fans a treat and allow them to once again play as the iconic heroes of Onimusha like Samanosuke, Jubei Yagyu, and Mega Man. Wait, what?
Mega Man! Jack into the world of Onimusha!
Yes, Mega Man.exe from the Mega Man Battle Network games and Zero from the Mega Man Zero series are in here as unlockable characters, and I am bringing that up because A, it's just really weird, and because B, it's a great segue into Number 8, Mega Man Power Battle and Mega Man 2 Power Fighters. Yeah, speaking of Capcom series that got fighting game spin-offs, a lot of people don't realize that the Blue Bomber himself got a fighting game at the arcades. 2 of them, in fact. Well, sort of. Okay, I'll admit, this one has always miffed me a little bit because people refer to these games as fighting games. They are officially classified by Capcom as fighting games, but I never thought they were fighting games. What you do is you pick either Mega Man, Proto Man, Base, or if you're playing the sequel, you can pick Duo as well. Then you go through a series of fights with Robot Masters, and that's kind of it. So it doesn't really feel like a fighting game, it feels more like a boss rush mode. But I think you could easily turn this into a fighting game. All the moves are based around the logic of going head-to-head with other players. You've even got the whole life bar UI set up right there on the screen. So since Capcom's other re-releases have included online play, how about going one step further and giving this game an online versus mode, where now you and the other player can duke it out as any of the selectable fighters, or even let you control any of the Robot Masters in the game. Might be some balancing problems with that last idea, but just having you and your friends duke it out as Proto Man and Base and Mega Man, yeah, there shouldn't really be a problem with that. So yeah, come on Capcom, let's give all the Mega Man fans out there a treat and re-release these games so that way they finally have the opportunity to... Oh! Looks like literally as I was editing this video, Capcom already announced that they were going to be bringing these games back as part of the Capcom Arcade Stadium. Dang, that is slowly becoming a really impressive service. An impressive service that has already thrown multiple monkey wrenches into this video that I've been working on for the last week. Well, alright, let's see. I need to spice this entry up a little then. Oh, okay, I got it. Let's say that if you still want to do a special Mega Man fighting game collection, in that case, you could package these two games together and then throw in a bonus unlockable. Let's say that if you put these games together in a collection, if you beat both games with all the characters, then you could unlock Street Fighter Cross Mega Man. This was a game that Capcom put out on their website to celebrate the 25th anniversary of both titles, but was never ported to any console. So if you include it in some kind of a collection with these other two Mega Man games, then it would be the perfect excuse to preserve this weird little crossover. Speaking of Street Fighter, I swear I'm not trying to do these segues on purpose, they're just lining up really well. Number 7, Street Fighter Alpha 3 Max. Okay, hold up. I know what you're thinking. I thought we were supposed to be getting new games in this video. Street Fighter Alpha 3 already got ported onto the Street Fighter Anniversary Collection. Yes, that's true. The Street Fighter Anniversary Collection was a loving tribute to that series, as it included arcade ports of almost every version of Street Fighter 1, 2, 3, and Alpha. So if you want to play the arcade version of Street Fighter Alpha 3, you already have that. But I ain't talking about the arcade version, because when Street Fighter Alpha 3 came to home consoles, they added 6 new playable characters. Then when it came to the PSP, they added 4 more playable characters. Yes, that's right. There is a version of Street Fighter Alpha 3 out there that has 10 more characters than the one that you got in the Anniversary Collection. And if you tell me there's a version of a game out there that has 10 more characters than the version that you can buy, my question is always going to be, well then why can't I buy that version? So yeah, if we ever end up getting a Capcom Fighting Collection Volume 2, the PSP port of Street Fighter Alpha 3 would be an excellent game to throw in there because Capcom has denied the world the ability to play as Maki for too long. And speaking of Maki, I'm just kidding, I don't have any more segues, but man, I was on a roll there for a while. Number 6, Techromancer. Okay, now we're getting weird. Now we're getting into the lesser known corners of Capcom's fighting history. Techromancer can best be described as the legally distinct Toonami fighting game. It's a robot fighter where you pick one of 9 mechs and a few extra hidden characters, and each of these characters are loosely based around either pre-established giant robots or just general themes in the mech and kaiju genre. But while this game sounds on paper like just fighting with the stunt doubles of the big canonical characters, it's actually exploding with its own personality. You see, having a roster full of homage characters plays into the theme of the game, which is basically to make this entire thing feel like one big Saturday morning cartoon mashup. The gameplay is a fun, brainless button masher. The colors and designs just pop with so much energy, and when you play through each character's story mode, it's designed to look like you're watching it all play out on a cartoon. This game might not be a perfectly tightly polished, well-balanced competitive fighter, but it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to have the feeling of smacking your toys around as a kid, and it nails that. And it's such a weird idea that really speaks to the day and age of Capcom that I love. That time when Capcom would just pump out an insane idea just because it sounded fun and not because a room full of market researchers said that it's the best strategic release to increase their quarterly profits, and I think we need to be reminded of that old Capcom every now and again. Number 5, Star Gladiator. Hey, remember when Marvel vs. Capcom 2 came out and you were looking at that huge lineup of characters and you were running down the Capcom side and your mind was just being blown by what characters were included in here? And then you got to this one bad boy holding up a lightsaber and you thought, who the heck is this guy? He looks cool. That was Hayato Kanzuki from Star Gladiator, and it absolutely deserves to be re-released, either in some brand new Capcom Fighting Collection or packaged alongside its sequel Plasma Sword. This was Capcom's first in-house 3D fighting game, so just speaking from a purely historical perspective, it absolutely deserves to be preserved. Plus, in that interview, Shuhei Matsumoto said that part of the reason for this Capcom Fighting Collection was so that younger audiences would know where a lot of the references they see in other games come from, and June from Star Gladiator gets referenced way more than you might think. So it'd probably be nice for anyone under the age of 30 to be able to finally understand why Chun-Li is dressed like this in Street Fighter V. But beyond that, this game is one of those things that people need to play to believe. I mentioned that Techromancer was a bunch of homages to giant robot animes. Well, Star Gladiator is an homage to Star Wars. And when I say homage, I mean it's just legally distinct enough for Capcom to not be sued because holy crap, they are doing a horrible job of trying to hide it. I mean, that is just Chewbacca and that is just Darth Vader. It is wild that this thing exists, and I would love to see people finally learning about this thing. And as for the gameplay, the original Star Gladiator, yeah, it's kinda rough, but the sequel Plasma Sword is actually a lot of fun. Big, goofy, dumb fun. There's this mechanic in the game where everyone can turn the stage into a room where they now gain crazy abilities that warp the laws of physics, and these abilities range from OP to hilarious. I need this madness to be given online play so that way we can see what pro players can really do with this broken mechanic. Number 4, Sengoku Basara Cross. I've never gotten an opportunity to talk about this on this channel, so I have to put this out there. Sengoku Basara Cross is legit. This game is one of the most underrated fighting games I've ever played because it is so good and nobody talks about it. Based on Capcom's Musou franchise of the same name, Sengoku Basara Cross was obviously published by Capcom, but it was made by Arc Systems Works. Yes, I have heard people asking for years for Arc Systems to take on a Capcom property, and well, turns out they already did it. And it was great. You can definitely feel the Guilty Gear influence with how these characters move. They even have their trademark Arc-Sys insta-kills, but you can also call on allies to come in for an attack, making this almost like a pseudo Guilty Gear with Marvel-style assist, and with a description like that, it's no wonder it feels so good. Well, okay, yes, for that one person who's going to point out in the comments, yes, I will admit it can be pretty degenerate at times, and I have heard that apparently multiple characters have infinites in here, but who cares? This thing is crazy fun to play, and more people need to know about this. Seriously, can we get some big influencer out there to play this thing? Because it needs more attention. So if we ever do end up getting a Capcom Fighting Collection 2, this would be a perfect game for that. Or maybe just put on some kind of a Sengoku Basara collection. I know plenty of Musou fans would love to see that. And before anyone points out that this game only came out in Japan, so it can't be in a collection that gets released to the rest of the world, guess what? Cyberbot's Full Metal Madness also only came out in Japan, and not only is that going to be in the upcoming Capcom Fighting Collection, that's going to be the 3rd time it's been re-released outside Japan. Still never been translated though. Seriously, who is it over at Capcom that thinks that the world loves cyberbots but doesn't want to know what anyone is talking about in that game? And speaking of games that never left Japan, hey, the segues are back, everyone! Number 3, Final Fight Revenge. On the Sega Saturn, Capcom's legendary beat-em-up series got its own fighting game, Final Fight Revenge. And that game is... Okay, listen. I can't talk about how this game plays, because out of all the games I'm talking about on today's list, this is the only one I've never touched. Never got a chance to get my hands on. And why is that? Well, the game never left Japan, but neither did a lot of the games that I own. I still bought a Japanese PS2 and had no problem getting around that. And hey, the Sega Saturn already had its own way of playing Japanese games, so that shouldn't be too hard to work around. So why have I never played this? Holy crap. Yeah, this game is shockingly expensive. The cheapest copies of it online still go for over $300. And I'll admit, I've spent stupid amounts of money on rare games before, but even I have to come to my senses on this one. So yeah, Capcom just re-released this already. Even if it's a bad game, no game should cost this much without another way of buying it. Heck, you don't even have to give it its own re-release. I've seen that big Metro City open world map that you have planned for Street Fighter 6. Well, Metro City is the home of the Final Fight characters, so just create an arcade within that big Metro City map, make it so that if your character goes in there, they can play some old Capcom games, and put Final Fight Revenge in there. It worked for Virtua Fighter and Yakuza. Plus, I've seen the giant super moves in that game. I guarantee you would get a lot of free advertising from YouTubers reacting to how stupid they are. Number 2, Power Stone. How is there not a Power Stone collection on modern consoles? Is it because people don't know it? Nope, I've seen people asking for this thing to come back constantly. Is it because Capcom doesn't have the data on it anymore? Could it have been lost to the ages? Nope, they put out a PSP collection of both games in it, so they already have the digital version of it right there ready to go. Is there just not a good market for it? This game would be amazing on the Switch. Power Stone is an arena fighter, but it's not really a competitive fighter, it's far more of a party game fighter. You run across this big three-dimensional field throwing furniture across the stage or picking up various items that pop out of chests and using them as weapons. Also, you can try and collect 3 stones that will transform you into your super form that gives you insanely over-the-top abilities. It's the kind of zany, wacky gameplay that makes Smash Bros. With all the items turned on so much fun, and Power Stone 2 takes that to a whole other level with its moving stages and stage hazards. This is the perfect time to re-release this series. But there's still one other franchise out there even more deserving of that number 1 spot. Number 1, Rival Schools. If you are at all shocked to see the Rival Schools series at the number 1 spot, then you do not know me. These games are some of my favorite fighting games of all time. Heck, I even dedicated the very first episode of our Fighting Game Retrospective series to it. And it's no wonder why. The gameplay is over the top with big cinematic team-up cutscenes that were way ahead of their time. The school setting is instantly relatable to anyone picking this game up. The characters are exploding with personality and are so memorable. Heck, this is the game that introduced the world to one of my favorite fighting game characters of all time, Akira Kazama, who within the last year was added to Street Fighter V, and when she was announced, Capcom fans voted her as the character they were most excited for, and the month she came out, she was the second most played character in a game that had a massive roster. So you want to talk about a Capcom test? How's that for a test? You add a character from Rival Schools to Street Fighter and everyone loses their minds over it? Maybe that should tell you that people want to play these games again. And if we got a Rival Schools collection, then we could get the original game, the final game, Project Justice, which had one of the best implementations of a story mode into the arcade layer that I've ever seen, and we could even get the second game, which never left Japan. We could finally translate that game, as well as translating the school life simulator that got cut out of the first game for the West. Yes, you heard correct. Rival Schools 1 and Rival Schools 2 had essentially a dating sim that was never translated. So you want to make people pay attention, Capcom? Tell them that not only are we getting a Rival Schools collection, but it'll include all the cut content fully translated, and that would be a dream collection for all the old school Capcom fighting fans. But that's what I'd want to see. Let me know which of these games you would want most in a new fighting game collection, or let me know if there are any games that I missed that should have been included in this list. Beautiful Joe Red Hot Rumble? That weird online Street Fighter that had Barack Obama in it? That is real, by the way. I'm not making that one up. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope if you're interested in these older Capcom fighting games, then maybe check out that fighting game collection coming out this month. And if you dug what you saw here today, then check out the rest of our channel. We cover mostly fighting games, doing stuff like retrospectives, wish list. If that sounds interesting to you, then hit that subscribe button and ring that bell. And if you want more from me, you can always catch me on Twitter at Thorgi's Arcade. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Stay safe out there, and come back next time.